This week on the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, I interview former CEO Shona Elliott, and we talk about issues revolving around crises. And she comes out and lets us know how you can remain resilient and be effective in the middle of the crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast, episode 131, Leading Through a Crisis with former CEO Shona Elliott.
Welcome to this episode of Moving Forward Leadership. Stick around and learn how to achieve, excel, and become a leader that people willingly follow. Lead, don't boss. And now, here's the host of our show, Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy.
Welcome one and welcome all to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It is your Chief Leadership Officer, Scott McCarthy, and it's so great to have you here to what I consider to be the best leadership podcast going. Why? Because we talk about how you can lead through the three domains of leadership, those being leading yourself so that you can reach your optimal performance. You can lead your team so that they can hit their peak performance through tightly knit teams. And finally, how you lead your organization so that you can increase its output, whatever that output is. And here I bring world-class guests like Shona today and match them with my 20 years of military experience to give you this show. So it's so great to have you here. And we are talking about something that is super crucial today. Why? Because we're in the middle of one already still. We're in the middle of a global crisis still. It may seem like it's settled down, but guess what? It's not really settled down, folks. So let me tell you, you better sit back and strap in and get some notes ready because we have a rockin' show with Shona today. Why? Because she's an experienced senior leader who's passionate about helping other leaders connect and engage with their greatest assets, their employees. So she's all about increasing employee retention, engagement, and achieving an organization's strategic goals. Doesn't sound like moving forward leadership's aim as well? It is. She understands many challenges, competing priorities of busy execs, and having been in their shoes, designing, successfully implementing organizational strategic plans. She's recognized and harnessed the power of employee engagement to achieve her organization's goals. And let me tell you, little quick, teaser alert that we talk about how engagement is so crucial at a time like right now, because engagement is what's going to get you through the hump of a crisis and get you at the other end. Shona's awesome. She is a spectacular speaker. We have so much fun on this show, but at the same time, it is jam-packed with crucial information in there for you. So you know what? That's enough for me. So why don't you sit back, relax, and enjoy my interview with Shona Elliott. Shona, welcome to the Moving Forward Leadership Podcast. It's so great to have you here.
Oh, thanks for having me, Scott. I really appreciate it.
It is 7:10 a.m. my time, 6:10 a.m. your time. Yet we've both been up for a couple hours already. What are we doing?
We have been. We're passionate about the topic of leadership, so this is wonderful.
It's funny. I was thinking, because I'm up at 5 a.m. every day. So I've been up over 2 hours now. And this is for me, it's my me time. It's my training time. It's getting prepared for the daytime, and that's basically where my early mornings come from. But I was wondering for you, what's your drive to be up so early?
I largely think driven by the same things as yourself. You need a little bit of alone time, and I have a 4-year-old, and I know you've got young children as well. And there's just no guarantee, unless you're up early, you're going to get any time to do any type of reflective thinking. I don't have enough time to build in training like you have, into that early morning, but I do my best to fit in a little bit of meditation, some gratitude work, and then I get kind of at what I need to with respect to writing or responding to some emails and inquiries, preparing for podcasts, what have you. So some days that is about an hour for me. So Savannah might be up at 6. Hopefully today she'll make it to 7:30. So the days I need more are always the days that she's always up earlier than I would expect. But you get in what you can and you fit in the rest at some point later in the day.
To me, it just sets the day up so much better. And I preach about this at Moving Forward Leadership when I talk about morning routines and stuff like this. Because at Moving Forward Leadership, I focus on 3S, or the 3 domains of leadership: leading yourself, leading your team, leading your organization. And the whole part of I talk about when I'm talking about getting up early, getting into a healthy morning routine, is all leading yourself, preparing your body, preparing your mind for what's the come for the day, and taking that a little bit of time. Most people this day and age get up, hit the floor, grab their phone, walk, grab coffee, and start cranking out emails and phone calls right away. And to me, that's just not setting themselves up for success.
No, I agree. It's interesting. I'm in a mentorship program with someone named Marianne Williamson, and she was an ex-presidential Democratic candidate, and she's written 13 books. I think 7 of them are New York Times bestsellers. And we had one of our mentorship calls last night. It's the first time she's done this, and it's for a small group of our authors, all with this same publishing group I'm with. And she spoke just about this, about the importance of us as leaders or authors really building in the space to meditate. And if you have a spiritual practice, to connect with that. And so that you are really centered with respect to how you are going to speak to your audience. So whether your audience is those you lead, or in your case, Scott, your podcast, or if you're doing any of your blogging or your video segments that you do, or for me, speaking or any social media presence, not having that spiritual practice or meditative practice or centering practice really does color how you approach any type of response. And I notice when I'm not building in a meditative practice or a gratitude practice, how I show up and how I speak is always different than when I do. And so I know that, and yet I struggle every day to kind of consistently build it in, like all people do. And I actually posted on Facebook this morning to Marianne, like, how do you do that? Because she's way busier than I am. And I appreciate she doesn't have a young daughter at home anymore, but yet she has so many competing demands. And how do you know what to say yes to and what to say no to build in that space and energy for those practices that are absolutely needed? So I don't have a response yet, but I'll be very curious to see how she does that given all that's on her plate. So I think everyone struggles and everyone knows the importance of it. And yet we're all kind of searching for how to consistently build those practices into our day.
Yeah, for sure. Getting consistent with a routine is definitely can be challenging, especially depending on circumstances, like both you and I with young children, depending on work schedules and all that stuff. Yet, I feel like it sets me up so much better for the day. I'm so clear in my mind, so more deliberate with my intentions, decisions, actions, and everything, right? And the day and age we're in right now, I think we need that more than ever. We're in the middle of the COVID-19 crisis. It's chaos. It's pandemonium. It's sometimes there's knee-jerk reactions, and you can tell people are not necessarily having these nice routines. So and that's kind of the focus of our talk today. We're going to be talking a lot about what it means, how leaders can get through this crisis, and what is it going to look like as we get on the other end. So what are your thoughts right now as where we sit right now? What should leaders be thinking about? We're I almost want to say we're still kind of in the middle. My gut feel says we're still in the middle of this COVID-19 crisis. So what should we be thinking right now about being in where we are right now? And then we need to look at down the line.
Right. It's a question I've had the opportunity to do some thinking about and speaking with some leaders about and doing some interviews about. And there's a couple of different crises that are occurring right now. So certainly there's the pandemic, and every organization has their own journey with respect to how COVID has impacted their work. So if they're in the business of providing essential services, they may have been impacted in terms of work overload. If you're a healthcare organization here in the United States, you may have been impacted, but in a different way. There's a lot of hospitals right now that are furloughing or laying off staff or terminating positions, and that is providing a different impact in those organizations. So I'll speak to that in a minute. And that actually is more the predominant issue right now in healthcare here in the U.S. is that there are significant reductions in service lines and physicians being laid off or terminated, and same with healthcare professionals. And then there's the kind of the next wave, I've been hearing it called the racial pandemic. So certainly there's been a lot of challenges with respect to ensuring there are appropriate policies and strategies in place to deal with anti-racism or racism and inclusivity. And so folks coming out of the pandemic related to COVID has been faced with this whole other issue that is significant in a number of organizations here in the US. So where do leaders go? Senior leaders I've spoken to are scared and paralyzed. They don't know what to do next. They've kind of run out of their resilience, burned out the resilience muscle, so to speak. They just kind of got through this unanticipated pandemic with COVID. There's maybe a second wave. There's all this impact to revenue that they hadn't anticipated. It's lasted 3 months. They did a great job trying to navigate through it. And now there's perhaps this issue with racism that they need to attend to as well, and not sure how to do that. So the resilience muscle is basically burnt out. And how do they build that resilience back up when they basically spent all of their energy just kind of navigating the last 3 months? And so the first things first with senior leaders or any leader, it really is, really understanding where they're at from a self-care perspective. So having some sense as to what their energy levels are they getting the sleep they need? How burnt out are they? And dealing with that. If they don't take care of first things first, there isn't going to be anything left for them to lead in the way they need to lead to kind of get through what's next. Because what is next to me is actually more significant than what they've just gone through. So after the dust settles, you kind of look around and see what's needed to be attended to, what cultural issues need, the first response. And, if they have significant impact to revenue, that is a whole animal unto itself that they need to kind of to wrestle with. So they don't have that energy. They don't have that right mindset. They haven't built in those practices we just spoke about with respect to routines around being grateful and or meditating or fitness, whatever they need to do. If they haven't maintained those routines, it's so imperative that they find the time and space to do that. And then they have to really address their organization's healing. Each organization's in a different state. So senior leaders or any leaders really need to build in the time and the space to let the organization heal by allowing employees to share their stories about how they've been impacted in whatever way they've been impacted, and to allow that space for those discussions. And leaders need to share in those discussions as well and be transparent with respect to what's happened for them and show their vulnerabilities in that space as well. So those are some of the first few steps that need to happen. And a lot of organizations are wrestling with how transparent they need to be with respect to owning their missteps along the way. And, the direction advice I would give and the steps I would take if I was in their shoes, like I once was, is the more transparent you can be, the better. And to own that and have conversation about it. And most importantly, ask employees their views on how things could have looked different. No one really anticipated a pandemic to occur, especially in the way it has. And so leaders shouldn't be expected to get it right all the time. There is no blueprint for how to handle what we've just been through. So saying that and talking to your employees, I would love your input into how we could have done things differently. And here's where we felt we didn't really hit the mark. Here's what we're going to do about it, our lessons learned, and what are your thoughts on that? And help us kind of design, our future responses given we're in a different place as we address these types of issues going forward.
There's so much great stuff in there. Wow. Where do I start unpacking? I think one of the interesting things you mentioned was resilience within the leader, right? Within themselves. And that's not a infinite thing. There's only so much people have. And sometimes leaders, especially newer leaders or very senior leaders who've basically gotten their way throughout their career, think that they have much more than what they actually do. So they go through a episode like we're going through right now, a crisis that we're going through right now. And sometimes in the past, organizations go through crises that require the leaders to really step up and use up their resilience. How can leaders go about regenerating that in an effective way? Because leaders need to understand that they only have so much of this. And if they're going to be effective for themselves, for their organizations, for their teams to get the best possible outcomes, they need to realize that they're going to be put under stress again. They're going to use up the resilience again. So they need to regenerate that in order to have it ready to roll again.
I agree. So in addition to the spiritual practices that I mentioned, or meditative practices, self-care practices, sleep practices, any of those kind of areas of focus, I really feel that leaders need to reflect on the why. Why are they in service? What is driving them to show up to work every day? And they need to understand if they've gotten off course with respect to that. So for myself in my own leadership journey over the years, I would certainly get off path. And that would be related to either working too many hours, not doing a fitness routine, not having the self practices that I need to have to remain kind of balanced at work. Or I just got burnt out, like with dealing with yet another issue with respect to our organization. And what used to really reconnect me to my purpose is spending time with my employees on the front line. So if I was a VP or a CEO, where I got my energy was walking in their shoes. So I would step aside and I would get out of my office and I would just spend a shift in an area within my portfolio. For example, I would clean toilets with our environmental services staff. I would deliver food trays, answer IT tickets, whatever it took to kind of let me reconnect with the reality of the environment of our employees and the work that they did. And those stories that I had during those experiences, I walked away with each one with goosebumps. I would be just absolutely blown away with respect to what they did for our patients if it was in the hospital environment. And it always just reshaped my perspective with respect to why I'm here. I'm here to serve these employees, providing exceptional care to our patients, keeping their environment clean, preventing hospital spread infection. And that just really re-energized me and got me out of my head with respect to my busyness in my senior leadership world and reconnected to what's important. So I like to say that I was really consistent with getting into the front lines, and I would try to do it every month or two. And I always knew when I was becoming burnt out in my perspective of leadership, or sometimes a bit jaded, it would always just kind of hit me like, oh my gosh, I just haven't done the work on the front lines. And I would schedule a shift and find an area I hadn't been to yet, and I would spend time with those employees, and always humbled and so grateful with respect to the work that they did that I have goosebumps just thinking about those memories, that it would just inspire me to continue on and do it with a different perspective than I had before. So that was how I built my resilience muscle. And I think for other leaders, understanding their why they're in service. Why did they take these positions, and why did they choose leadership? And really try to focus on that and find a way to connect back with that again. So whether that is reconnecting with the employees you serve, connecting in with a certain area of inspiration that kind of drives you, whatever that looks like for you is kind of what I would suggest to reconnect again.
Sometimes you have goals, but you know what? You have a hard time reaching them, and you just can't figure out why. Why is it that you can't achieve those things that you want to achieve? Maybe it's dedication. Maybe it's motivation. Maybe you haven't picked the right goals. So this is where I was not too long ago. And then I realized something. I've been developing the Power Goals program my entire life. And here it is now for you, where you can learn how to pick the right goals, figure out how to achieve those goals, how to stay on track, but most importantly, how to get back on track when you get off. So are you ready? Are ready to up your game and achieve those things that you've been meaning to achieve for so long now? Simply go to movingforwardleadership.com/power and learn more about the Power Goals program and achieve everything that you've been wanting to achieve. And now, back to the show. So awesome. I love, excuse me, that whole ideology of getting out and working the front lines, as you said. So my background is Canadian Army, and when I was a young platoon commander, I drove every piece of equipment within my transportation platoon. And I'm talking everything from tractor trailers to, the big cruiser buses to heavy equipment and everything in between, just so that I can have an idea when people came to me with the problems, what they were actually talking about. So when someone starts talking about tie-down straps and how they're so important, not losing a tank from a tractor trailer is very important. So when they tell me that, we need some new things, got it. I understood. But then when they start talking to me about snow blades and why they're important and what they do and stuff like this and why we need to procure more, I'm like, okay, it cuts down on the time, but as well, like you said, it rebuilds you up. It gives you inspiration. You see how hard your people are working, the work that they're doing, and it motivates you. And it also kind of goes back to, I think it's also a great opportunity to what you said earlier about talking to your people and getting their input and how we can move forward. Because when you do that, they become less tense. It's less formal, right? You're there as one of them. And they start talking to you as if you're just, you're not the VP, you're not the CEO, you're not the platoon commander, captain, major, whatever. In my case, you're just one of the guys or girls working the lines, and they start telling you things that you wouldn't necessarily hear in that formal setting. And I think that could be crucial moving forward. I think that could be crucial in getting those ideas out, and where we have failed going through this crisis, and then where we need to go post-crisis.
I absolutely agree. There's something in my book that I call mythology of management, or management mythology. And as a senior leader, in my experience, I started to notice that there would be stories shared by leaders at meetings that got repeated in other meetings. And those stories were never really fact checked against the reality at the front lines. So decisions would be made based on stories repeated from leaders at different meetings. And often we would make the wrong decision because we had the wrong information. So we'd get reports. Those reports sometimes are sanitized. Maybe they are polished in a way to kind of make it be more politically correct, all with good intention. And yet, to make decisions at a senior leadership table, you really do have to have a realistic view of what's happening in your organization. And for me, walking in the shoes of my employees or alongside of them was always a way to get basically a fact check of reality. And for me, that was super, super important. And I always share a story with folks in terms of how I, as a senior leader, would be saying things, and then until I fact checked myself, realized that perhaps we had some more work to do. And the story I share is that in one of the organizations I work with, I'm responsible for organizational culture and treating each other with respect and building relationships in the organization, and really was proud of the work we had done. An organization was about 1,200 employees, and one day I worked in the shoes of one of our environmental services workers in a unit that I did not have direct responsibility for. So I was a vice president, and it was one of the units that wasn't in my portfolio. So when I do my work with the employees, I don't do it in a under kind of cover boss kind of way. I show up and people know I'm coming, but in this case, people really didn't know who I was. And it's not like it's a big announcement, but I was there and I was in scrubs at my business suit, and it was I think a 7 a.m. shift, and we were cleaning a nursing unit, and I'm saying good morning and being my just usual self, and like I was like iced out. I was ignored, and the woman I was working with was so embarrassed, and we were not included in conversations, and it was like I could not believe what was happening, and I just kept doing my thing, cleaning the nursing unit, but we were definitely excluded. And about 8:00, one of the nursing union leaders showed up, who I did know, and she was like, "Hey, Shona, what are you doing here? And why are you in scrubs?" And I just said, "Hey, I'm just here trying to get a better understanding of what it's like to be an environmental services worker and see how I can help, and just trying to get a different perspective." Well, by 8:10. The dynamic on the unit changed. Everyone was saying good morning and being super nice to me, and I was just like, I felt sad. And I was like, gosh, obviously we have more work to do. And I spoke with the individual I was working with on the unit, because she was just embarrassed and really disappointed herself. And I had that conversation with her. I said, gosh, what a great experience for me to kind of see things different through your lens. And, I kind of talked to her about if she experiences this on an ongoing basis. And what she experienced that morning with me happened sometimes, not all the time. And it would depend on the staff working that day. So, it wasn't an all day thing, but I apologized to her on behalf of the organization. I said, I'm responsible for organizational culture and a bunch of other stuff. And what I say in regards to where we're at with respect in the workplace, obviously we haven't hit our mark yet. And so this really gave me incredible insight as to the work we need to do. And this is what I'll be doing to kind of move us in that direction. And I'm going to check in with you again in regards to, how are we doing, and what are your thoughts with respect to how that looks like? And it was wonderful. And so certainly over the next year, that gave me personal motivation to do additional work in regards to changing our culture. And I was able to check back with that employee, and things had changed within a year and certainly had gotten better. More work to be always done. And without that experience, I would never have known that we had missed the mark. And I needed that fact checked for my own self. And it was super helpful. So I really encourage leaders to do their own fact checking and see what's really happening in whatever way feels right for you, but to kind of move away from the stories you hear in your meeting rooms, boardrooms, in your office, what have you, and see what it's like for your employees and make sure that that is aligned, because sometimes it isn't. And I think the more you can do that, the more you realize what's working and what still needs improvement.
That's such a great story. And it's so true. I've seen that myself. Doing the exact same thing. It's funny you mentioned the sanitization of information as it goes up through the chain of command. There's a Army story along those lines where the private says something's absolute garbage. There's other choice words in there, but we'll keep this non-explicit today. And and by the time it hits the general, it's the greatest thing ever since sliced bread. And that's kind of how it goes, right? And you need to. And that's one of the reasons why you need to get out, especially in times like this. Because sanitized information that gets changed from the front lines to before it hits your desk or the meeting room or whatever, it's useless. It's going to veer you off. It's going to make you make decisions that are not putting you on the right course because you didn't realize you're not looking at the same route. So it's so crucial. It's so crucial for leaders to get out there. You talked a bit about culture, and I love talking about culture here at Moving Forward Leadership. I think it's such an important topic. I think it's a topic that probably doesn't get discussed enough around leadership boardrooms and etc. How do you see culture changing as we move forward, as we start rising from the ashes of the various, as you said earlier, the various pandemics, not just the COVID one, but the racial one, the police brutality one, and all its other, uprisings against different organizations out there. How do you see organizational culture moving forward as we get closer to getting out of this?
Yeah, I think, obviously it'll be different for each organization and their own journeys through the last 3 or 4 months. And I think a lot of culture will be shaped on how leaders obviously handled the various pandemics or various crises, and how they handle their emergence. And so if there was trust issues going into COVID, so as an example, in the US here, there was a number of organizations that were not prepared and did not have the appropriate supplies of personal protective equipment. And how they handled that and how they communicated that lent itself to some issues of distrust. And so how senior leaders navigate those issues and how transparent they are with saying, hey, we made the wrong budgetary decisions. We decided not to have the appropriate stockpiles on hand. We took a risk. Usually there aren't pandemics every year, so we decided to use those dollars in a different place. And we apologize. And this is how we're going to rebuild the trust and how we're going to engage you in future conversations about this. I think is really crucial for their culture as they move forward. But what I'm seeing more of here in the U.S. is a different issue in the healthcare sector and in other sectors as well, where they have to restructure as a result of lack of revenue coming in. And so I'm seeing some organizations handle this incredibly difficult subject well, and I'm seeing other organizations handle it not so well. And so how senior leaders choose to show up in these awkward, difficult conversations, I think is going to be fundamental in terms of shaping their culture going forward. So those that do it in a really insensitive way and don't speak with staff around the budgetary pressures and the revenue pressures that are occurring and really shape the decisions that are being made to restructure, lay off, or terminate positions, if they're not upfront with those dynamics and aren't talking to staff about it, which I know as a senior leader is so hard to do. No one wants to have those challenging discussions. And yet, if they don't have them, then the cultural impacts as they come through those restructurings, I think is significant. So how senior leaders or any leaders really kind of choose how to handle those challenging discussions kind of head on, I think shapes the culture. Employees understand the environment that's happening, and they'll understand the dynamics that you're faced with as a leader to make those difficult decisions. And if you don't engage in that conversation and you don't answer their questions and you don't explain the environmental landscape that is occurring, then it's an absence of information. And then that becomes just a opportunity for speculation and rumors and gossip to occur, which is so detrimental to culture. So my advice to leaders is, I think it's simple on the face of it, and yet I know so hard to implement, which is have the needed discussions, be honest, be transparent. I think all employees understand what you're facing. They just don't understand why you're not talking to them about it. So they want to be part of the solution. I think everyone is facing what's called a new normal. I call it the next normal because we're not out of this yet. So help design the next normal with your employees. They want to help. They want to see the organization survive and flourish. So engage them. Don't hide in the office, and don't just communicate via an email or a memo or a video update. I think you just have to get down into the front lines and have those dialogues and conversation that's needed to really engage folks in planning and creating that next normal.
I love that part about it's easy to talk, but difficult to implement, and that's kind of leadership 101 right there, and everything leadership really. It's like, yeah, just do that. Like, wow,
Yeah.
that is not so simple, right?
It's not. And I say that. And so I think one of the gifts that I try to provide folks that I'm supporting right now is that I've been in a senior leader's shoes. I've done it. I have had to do restructurings more times than I can count. So I practice what I preach, and I've done things the right way and I've done things the not so right ways. And so I'm able to relate to leaders in those difficult situations and be able to provide my insight and provide the perspective that, as difficult as it is, having the conversation with employees in that transparent way is always better than not, and avoiding it or doing nothing. So I've been there, and I wouldn't give advice that I haven't done myself. And so I know how challenging it is. And trying to support leaders and having that reframed perspective is kind of that space I'm in right now. And you have a gift, Scott, to be able to provide that to those that you're working with as well, to provide that support, because it is somewhat lonely in the leadership world. And being able to give that gift of perspective to do that difficult thing and have those hard conversations is that support that we can be providing today.
No, for sure. Yeah, it's definitely lonely at the top, and the transparency, I think, gets underrated. Being transparent in decisions, being transparent in your thoughts, being transparent in what's coming forward gets a bit underrated. And I think more leaders need to use that tool, because it gives you credibility with your people. They start to understand the decisions that you make, and more importantly, the reasons why you make the decisions. And sometimes, like, as you said, you're part of restructurings. I was a senior leader as well, and I commanded a squadron of 200 soldiers, and I had to make some tough calls. And it's not fun. But you have to turn around and you put your hand in the heart. You go, you know what? This is the best decision I can make at this time for the bulk of the organization. It's going to suck for some of you. I understand. I feel bad for you. Not so much, but most of you, I feel bad for you, right? And we're gonna get through this. We're gonna move forward, and we'll be better on the other end of this moment. And as long as you can put that out, at least you can put your hand in the heart, say, you know what, I did the best I could, and you're able to sleep better at night. And people understanding where you come from, you being transparent, vice people going, oh, I wonder, what's going on, what's around the corner. They made this really weird decision. No one understands why. Obviously, there's something up, and that goes back to what you talked about earlier, the rumor mill, and how detrimental that can be to an organization, how that can kill culture, how that can kill that gel that binds teams together, that ultimately is required for high-performing teams. So that transparency piece at the top, I think, is crucial, and I think it doesn't get enough emphasis put on it.
I absolutely agree. And I think one of the biggest lessons I've had in my leadership journey has been around engaging employees in the conversation on the front end. So we, as leaders, seem to think, oh, we have to have all the answers and these are the decisions we're going to make. And yet when you present the challenge you're facing to employees and you ask for their input, it is amazing as to the ideas that emerge that you hadn't considered. You think you know it all and this is what you have to do. And yet I have always been surprised as to what we hadn't considered. And I always like to ask on the front end, because asking after the fact, it is far more work and far more damage that's been done. And so when you engage on that front end, then you are more likely to really paint the picture as to what's happening. Employees will understand more in terms of the current environment, and they'll buy into the decision at the end of the day in a different way than if you hadn't asked them in the first place. So they're usually co-creating the next steps with you, and they will come up with ideas that leaders hadn't anticipated that actually just take you off course of what you were thinking in the first place. And as a result, I think you're making a more informed decision that will have better organizational cultural impact than if you hadn't. And I know that takes time. And I share in my book a story where in my, what I thought enlightened leadership state, had made a decision around a policy around dress code. One of my directors of occupational health and safety said, we're going to ban the use of Crocs in our healthcare facility. And this was years back, but Crocs were really popular in the day, especially in hospitals. And so I'm like, okay, yes, Crocs, they're unsafe. They got holes everywhere. And oh my gosh, out of the hospital workplace. So she wrote a policy that said no Crocs allowed. And I'm thinking, this is cool. I didn't think twice about it. And the backlash that we received as a result of banning Crocs in the workplace was absolutely A, surprising, and B, just incredible. And a couple of union leaders who I had great respect for met with me, and they said, like, why would you do that? There are Crocs that are the healthcare model of Crocs. Aren't those safe? I'm like, I hadn't heard of those before. And so sure enough, we did the investigation, and they had released a healthcare model that had we created the right policy, which was a safe footwear policy instead of a no Crocs policy, we would have found that out, hit the mark, and avoided a lot of rework and a lot of distress in the organization. And so I always say it is less work to ask on the front end than it is to do the cleanup on the back end. So take that extra time and talk to folks about what you're thinking, and you'll always get great feedback that will help save time at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's an interesting story that reminds me of one of my own, actually, which I'll quickly share. So more along the lines of how it can affect morale. So I'm a graduate of the Royal Military College here in Kingston. And in my 4th year, they changed the food schedule. So Saturday at lunchtime, we used to always have chicken fingers. Now, one could probably think about why a university-age person would enjoy a good chicken finger on a Saturday at lunchtime. So in my 4th year, they removed chicken fingers from the menu at Saturday at lunchtime, and you want to hear about the revolt that would going on for close to 2,000 officer cadets at the Royal Military College. And it got so bad, it ended up at... So to back up, there is an internal rank system within the college. So the officer cadets have their own kind of rank structure, positions that they get assigned throughout the year. So I went to the top of that chain, which that person works hand in hand with the director of cadets. So a full colonel, one step down from the commandant of the college. And that is where the chicken finger fiasco ended up. And much like you said, right? No one took input. No one said, "Hey, cadets, we're thinking about changing the menu. Would you be upset if we stopped serving chicken fingers on a Saturday?" No one asked that simple question, but that was the outcome of that change. So just a humorous story, a little tongue in cheek, but at the same time, it just shows that the simplest thing can have massive impact on your people. Shona, this has been a fantastic conversation, one which we could probably go on for hours, but unfortunately the show does need to come to an end at some point. But before we wrap up, we got a couple last questions for you, and one is a question I asked to all the guests here at Moving Forward Leadership, and that is, according to you, Shona Elliott, what makes a great leader?
Great question. I think a great leader has the perspective to be in service to those that they lead. In my view, those that have that view approach their leadership role so much differently than those that are in it for the status or the title. And I think a leader who shows up in a space who genuinely and authentically connects to their employees by listening to them and are interested in their perspective, I think lead in such a different way than those that don't. So those are kind of the two main attributes I look for in those that were on my leadership team, and what I always strive for when I was in a leadership position.
Awesome. Absolutely love it. I think those are great principles for sure. And the final question is, how can people find you? How can they follow you, be part of your journey? Feel free to give yourself a shameless plug. It's all for you now.
Well, I do have a book out. It's on Amazon right now. It's called Create Value as a Senior Leader. It'll be available in bookstores in April of 2021, but you can get it on Amazon, or you can just find me on the web at www.shonaelliott.org. And I will have an ebook out in the next few weeks in regards to what senior leaders need to think about or consider as they emerge from crisis. So I'm happy to provide that as a free resource for your audience as well.
Awesome. And for the listeners, easy as always, just go to movingforwardleadership.com/131, and it's all there in the show notes. Again, Shona, thanks for coming out. Thanks for being part of the show. It's so great to connect with you.
Oh, same here, Scott. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, that's all I got for you fine folks today. I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you enjoyed the interview. And most importantly, I hope you got something out of it. And if you did, remember R², S², right? Rate and review the show so that it gets a little bit noticed, a bit more. But most importantly, I can help more people, because that's what I'm here for. That's what my guests are here for, is to help more people become better leaders and not being bosses, right? So remember that. R², rate and review. S, share the show. Share this show with someone who you think can relate to the podcast as a whole and today's topic. And then finally, subscribe. Subscribe so that you never miss another episode. And you can do that via your podcast playing app of choice through movingforwardleadership.com/subscribe. That's it for today, ladies and gentlemen. And as always, stop bossing and start leading. Take care now.